Hey guys, tonight we'll listen to a calm and gentle story, one that will help you relax and drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make your bed comfortable, dim the lights, and allow your body to fully relax. Close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath in, and let it go. Let's begin the story. The first time Mara heard it, she thought it was a skylight complaining. It was a small sound, thin as thread and bright as a single struck glass. It came at 3 in the morning, after the rain had stopped and the street outside had folded itself into a slow, sleeping rumor. She woke because the house made the kinds of noises it always made. Pipes shifting in the cool, with settling, a far dog answering the ocean's muffled breath. The sound was different. It threaded through those ordinary noises like a thread of silver. Mara lay very still for several minutes. Her apartment was the top half of an old duplex on the corner of Harbor Street and Elm, its windows facing the water. The town was small enough that she knew who left which light on at night. The air smelled of salt and the faint, buttery tang of Mr. Ellery's bakery 2 doors down. He was an early man who sometimes baked at 3 in the morning and left boxes of cool croissants on his stoop for anyone who would be left awake. She listened. The sound, if it could be called that, was a single note that wanted to be a name. It did not vibrate the panes. It did not move the picture frames. It seemed to live only in the spaces between things, between heartbeat and breath, between floorboards, in the room where the house kept its small, thin memories. Mara turned onto her back and watched the ceiling fan move shadows in a lazy, patient circle. She kept thinking of skylight. She thought of the wind in the chimney. She thought of sleep deprivation making small, precise illusions. But when sleep refused to claim her, she stood and padded to the kitchen, bare feet cold, and poured herself a cup of tea. The kettle hissed, steam rose, and for a moment everything was just the ordinary ritual of waking. She brought the cup to the window and pressed her forehead to the cool glass. Harbor Street was a ribbon of empty light. A gull gleamed somewhere near the water, turning pale in the weak light of a street lamp. The sound came again, nearer now, or so it seemed, and on the second strike she realized it was not outside. It came from the attic. Her apartment was 2 stories of a house that had been a single family's home for a long time before splitting into 2 units. There was an attic access tucked above a closet in the hallway, a square that had been painted and repainted until the wood lost track of its original color. Mara had never bothered with the attic. It was not a place she thought of as necessary. She had lived there 3 years and never once climbed beyond that linen closet door. But the note, if she could so insist on naming it, had a patience to it. It repeated, now, 1 small ring, a pause, another. After the third, the sound no longer felt like a complaint. It felt like an invitation, or a question. She put on slippers, left the tea on the counter to cool, and climbed the narrow step ladder to the hatch. The house made the usual protesting sounds, wood bowing, nails sighing, soundtracks of old houses. The attic was a shallow space with a peaked roof. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight like tiny participles. Old trunks leaned like tired people. There was a smell she did not expect. It was not damp or mold, but warm cloth and old paper and the faintest trace of tobacco, the precise smell of something that had been loved and then put away. The sound came again from somewhere in the dark, and the beam of her light caught the edge of a photograph propped in a cracked frame. She moved closer and found it taped to a beam, as if the beam itself remembered to hold a memory. The photograph was of a woman in a dress that belonged to a different century. High-necked, lace at the sleeves, her hair rolled piled tightly. She looked directly at the camera with a face that did not belong to any era of smiles. It was calm and present. She had a small, almost invisible dark mark behind one ear. So slight Mara thought she could have imagined it. There was no caption. The paper edge had yellowed. The frame was flaked with old white paint. When she lifted the photograph, the note, thin as a spoonful of silver, faded. It left her the way a tide leaves a shell behind, not gone, but arranged elsewhere. Mara sat cross-legged on the attic floor with the photograph balanced on her knees. Downstairs the house hummed and slept. The photograph looked like an answer to a riddle she had never been told was riddled. The next day she told herself it was a silly, private thing. She wrote in the ledger she kept for oddities, an old habit from her days working in the archives. Date, time, weather, brief description. She described the sound as single, glass-like tone, repeated 3 times. Source, uncertain, prox likely attic. She drew a tiny sketch of the photograph's woman. The handwriting made everything smaller, manageable. Her life otherwise stayed ordinary. She curated small exhibitions for a historical society a town over and spent the afternoons at her desk arranging objects so the narratives made sense. Her job delighted in order. The ledger delighted in making the unknown orderly. But the night returned. On the second night, the sound had a texture. It arrived with the tide. Mara, who slept with the window cracked for the salt, could feel the sea inhaling and exhaling like something patient and old. The note came as a single bell inside her left ear. She woke and did not climb up at once. Instead, she sat in bed with the cat. Pippin, curled like a comma against her calf, and attempted to follow the thread of the note inside her own attention. It had an aspect of a word she couldn't quite hold. Once, very briefly, she heard the syllable loom, as if spoken softly underwater. But memory is a treacherous mirror. When she tried to snag the syllable with her mind, it diluted into the sound's texture and was gone. By the third night, she had started to keep a recording device, an old digital audio recorder she used at exhibitions to collect ambient sound, on the bedside table. She set it to capture from midnight to 5 and left the house lights low. She listened to the recording in the morning and found, in places where she expected only ocean breath and the occasional plink of a loose gutter, a pale thread of frequency. The recorder's waveform traced a neat line, a small spike at 3:07 a.m., a matching spike at 3:14, then silence. The amplitude was minute, nothing a stranger could discern if played in a cafe, but it was there, a narrow ridge in an otherwise flat shore of sound. She showed the waveform to Lena over video chat, fingers restless as Mara spoke. "You're being poetic," Lena said, rubbing at a cup of coffee half visible in the frame. "Or the house is old and weird. Or you've finally begun to let the ocean into your house properly. You're the curator of odd things. This is just practice." "Maybe," Mara said. "But listen, it has positions. It changes rooms." Lena shrugged. "What does a sound being in a room even mean? Are you about to become a sound detective? Do we get a little hat for that?" "Maybe we do," Mara said, and smiled to herself. The cat shifted and snuffled at her hand. She began to pay attention to the way the note nested inside other noises. It did not simply play the way a radio would. It settled into corners and pulled at doorways. Mr. Ellery, the baker, left for work early with a thermos and the smell of flour pressed into his coat. On his shift, he hummed the kind of shallow tune old men hum when they want to keep a rhythm in life. A week later, he told Mara, as they traded small talk by his counter, that he had started waking up at the same time the note did, and that sometimes, while rolling dough, he found himself humming a melody that had not been his before. He said it like one tells a neighbor about a lit lantern, soft and slightly embarrassed. Word made its quiet way around the edges, neighbors both curious and unconcerned. People either said nothing or supplied an anecdote from the past. "My grandmother used to say the house sings when it remembers," Mr. Ellery told her. She said keepers of old places listened between the rooms. Mara found herself cataloging more than waves. She cataloged the small changes in people. A woman down the lane took down a photograph from her shelf and gave it to her niece. A man who had lost his brother 20 years ago began setting a place at his table he had not touched since. The sound did not simply move air, it moved people in these slight, polite ways. And yet, personal effects aside, the attic photograph nagged. She tried to find out more about the woman in it. The Historical Society stored local directories, payroll ledgers, and marriage notices all in small, neat boxes. Mara pulled microfilm, which hissed like small storms. She scanned through dates and faces until she discovered a name that matched a surname scratched into a trunk in the attic: Westcott. The Westcotts had been prominent once. They owned a boarding house that burned a generation ago. There were mentions in old newspapers about a Westcott daughter who liked to bother sailors with her piano playing, and a Westcott son who left for the war and never quite came back. Everything in the town had an archaeology of loss. The photograph's woman might have been any of the Westcott daughters, or perhaps not a Westcott at all. Names shifted. Houses moved owners. Memory was porous. One humid night in July, Mara slept only by draping herself in small practices she'd learned long ago as a way to quiet. Deep breaths, the slow counting of exhalations. Thinking of measurement as an anchor. The sound arrived in 3 notes, and this time she heard it as a cadence that matched nothing she knew. The cat woke and padded to the attic hatch, chirping once as if to call. This time the note opened a tiny doorway in her head, and a single word, not a name, exactly, but a word of action, slid through the seam before she could hold it. Remember. When the light of the morning came, Mara carried the photograph downstairs to the kitchen and put it above the sink, leaning against the tile. She made tea, poured it extra strong, and wrote in the ledger, 3-note pattern, attic source, evokes imperative. Remember, subject unspecified. She drew a little star by the entry. She did not tell Lena that she found sleep sweeter than nights after the sound. The sound was not a malady. It was a mild enchantment. It loosened small knots. Sometimes, after a night of listening, she woke with an old detail intact, like the exact layout of a neighbor's childhood home, or with the sudden urge to call someone and say a kindness. It made small domestic revolutions. Pippin slept more heavily. The bread in the bakery rose with more confidence. But curiosity is a particular kind of weather. It floods patience and carves new channels. Mara wanted to know the woman in the photograph. She wanted to know whether the note lived in the attic because the beam held the paper, or whether the beam and the paper and the note were cousin memories that simply recognized one another. She wanted to map the sound like the careful technician she was by trade. Where, when, and what shape. She built a map on a sheet of butcher paper and tacked it to the wall. Street names, house numbers, hours. Tiny pins marked where she had felt the note, written in the small, careful capital letters she used in cataloging. The map looked like a constellation of small, shy lights. On the 7th night, the sound did something small and extraordinary. It did not come from the attic, and it did not come from the sea. It came from the space beneath the kitchen floor, a single high thread that vibrated in the teacup as if the cup had become a tiny bell. Pippin padded over and sat, tail wrapped around his paws, eyes half-mooned with the kind of attention animals have for things human eardrums try to ignore. Mara sat beside him and did the only thing she could think to do. She listened, and she held her breath. The note grew, not louder but fuller, as if the house inhaled the sound into its bones, and then let it go through rooms like a breath through lungs. It carried for a moment the memory of a child dropping a tiny tin soldier, of laughter halting, of a hand placed on a forehead to count a fever. It smelled, for a second, of something warm and old, lemon peel and laundry soap. When it stopped, Mara pressed her hand over her mouth as if she might catch the last of it, and in her mind a single image had arrived. No names, only the small geometry of an arm reaching across a bed to tuck a blanket. She felt, as she had never quite felt before with the ledger in front of her, the small fact that some things gather in houses and some things leave marks like dried glue. She folded the map to take it to her desk and, with the ordinary seriousness of someone who understands objects, she wrote the map's coordinates in the ledger and numbered them. Number 1, attic. Number 2, kitchen floor cavity. Number 3, the west-facing closet in the Westcott place. The list felt like breathing. That week the town offered her the kind of small miracles that feel invented. The librarian donated a stack of old Westcott house letters. Mr. Ellery left a barely warm roll on her stoop with a note. For late night listening. Someone had, at some point, been leaving small signposts for her. Or else the house had. Mara began to understand a modest truth. The sound did not owe her explanation. It asked only to be noticed. when she listened without the urgent desire to own or define it. The sound gave small things back: syllables, images, a neighbor's oddly specific memory of a wooden toy. When she tried to force the sound into a category, it retreated. On the 12th night, she climbed to the attic and sat beneath the beam and placed the photograph on her knees as the house glowed outside with the lamp of the harbor. The note arrived like a singular, patient bell, and then, less clearly this time, a whisper unfolded inside it. Nothing she could clearly read aloud, but a feeling like being given the right of way to an old, private corridor of time. Mara closed her eyes. The world outside her small roof folded itself into the larger night. Pippin settled into the hollow of her arm. If the house remembered, she thought, perhaps remembering was not a theft, but a form of mercy. When she fell asleep there among trunks and old quilts, she dreamed of a woman in a high-necked dress looking out over water. The dream was quiet but present. Mara woke before dawn, feeling as if the ocean had spoken to her in the small voice of a spoon. She folded the photograph and, with the deliberate calm of someone taking careful inventory, wrote the day's entry. Night 12. No persists. Not harmful. Gift or summons unknown. Continue observation. She set the ledger on the kitchen counter like a talisman and, for the first time in a long while, felt the small, slow relief of a thing you could not fix but could attend to. Outside, the gulls began their uncertain morning chorus. The town woke to its own slow arrangements. Somewhere in another house someone made tea. The sound had come, had left, and would return again when it wished. Until then, she had a map, a photograph, and the patient knowledge of a house that remembered its small lights. The next night came earlier than she expected. The clock said 10:03 p.m., but the house already felt like midnight. The sky outside was buried under a soft blanket of fog, the kind that swallows light, not reflects it. She stood near the window again, hands resting on the cold wooden frame, watching the mist move like slow breath over the street. Everything looked still, but deep inside the silence, there was something alive. She waited for that sound. At first, it didn't come. The air hummed gently, the way old houses hum when their bones remember stories. Then, like the faint creak of someone walking barefoot on old wood, it began. Creak. Pause. Creak. It came from the floor beneath her room, slow and uncertain, like a person testing each step, trying not to wake anyone. Her heartbeat matched it, rhythm for rhythm. The noise wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was familiar. She knelt and pressed her ear to the floor. The sound grew clearer, a strange whispering vibration, not quite human, not quite mechanical, more like the house itself was trying to speak. She whispered back, without thinking, as if responding to an old friend. "Who's there?" No answer, just another long creak, followed by a low sigh that seemed to come from inside the wood. It was almost like a voice beneath the floorboards, murmuring in its sleep. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Her candle flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness fell like a curtain. She stayed still, her breathing slow and shallow. She could hear it now, not one sound, but many, all blending into a low hum that seemed to breathe with her. When she stood up, the floor under her feet moved slightly, as though something was shifting below. Changing position, the house moaned softly, and in that moan, she heard words that made no sense, and yet they felt like a memory. "Don't go below." Her skin froze. The voice was faint, like the echo of someone who wasn't supposed to be alive anymore. She stepped back, searching for her candle, her hands trembling. The sky outside was buried under a soft blanket of fog, the kind that swallows light, not reflects it. She stood near the window again, hands resting on the cold wooden frame, watching the mist move like slow breath over the street. Everything looked still, but deep inside the silence, there was something alive. She waited for that sound. At first, it didn't come. The air hummed gently, the way old houses hum when their bones remember stories. Then, like the faint creak of someone walking barefoot on old wood, it began. Creak. Pause. Creak. It came from the floor beneath her room, slow and uncertain, like a person testing each step, trying not to wake anyone. Her heartbeat matched it, rhythm for rhythm. The noise wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was familiar. She knelt and pressed her ear to the floor. The sound grew clearer, a strange whispering vibration, not quite human, not quite mechanical, more like the house itself was trying to speak. She whispered back, without thinking, as if responding to an old friend. "Who's there?" No answer, just another long creak, followed by a low sigh that seemed to come from inside the wood. It was almost like a voice beneath the floorboards, murmuring in its sleep. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Her candle flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness fell like a curtain. She stayed still, her breathing slow and shallow. She could hear it now, not one sound, but many, all blending into a low hum that seemed to breathe with her. When she stood up, the floor under her feet moved slightly, as though something was shifting below. Changing position, the house moaned softly, and in that moan, she heard words that made no sense, and yet they felt like a memory. "Don't go below." Her skin froze. The voice was faint, like the echo of someone who wasn't supposed to be alive anymore. She stepped back, searching for her candle, her hands trembling. Lena had been her friend since school days, steady, warm, rational. Now she wore that worried expression that therapists wear when they're off duty but still diagnosing. "You look pale," she said. "I didn't sleep," Mara replied. Lena stirred her coffee. "You're still hearing things?" "Not hearing, feeling." Mara's fingers brushed the table. "It's like the air has memory." Lena sighed. "Mara, this town has always had stories. The sea, the fog, the wind through the pipes. It's easy to mistake sound for meaning. Then why does everyone pretend not to notice?" "Because if they did," Lena said, "they'd have to remember." Later, she visited Mr. Ellery again. He motioned her closer, eyes reflecting the pale sunlight like water. "I used to hear it when my wife was alive," he murmured. A low tone in the walls, like someone humming an old lullaby. She said it made her dream of the sea. After she died, the sound stopped for years. Then last night, it came back. Same note, same rhythm, like it wanted me to remember her voice. He looked away. But memories, they change shape, child. They forget you back. That night, Mara dreamed. The sound returned, not outside this time, but inside her. It wasn't a single tone anymore. It was a spectrum. Each frequency carried a color. Each color carried a scent. Blue smelled like salt. Gold tasted like black tea. Gray burned like smoke from winter leaves. She floated through the dream as through misted water. People moved around her, half-formed, faces she almost knew, voices she almost recognized. Every time she tried to focus, they dissolved, leaving behind only small sensations. A child's laughter, a glass shattering, a heartbeat skipping in surprise. Then came the whisper again, woven inside the tone. "Do you remember me?" She reached toward the sound, and the world folded inwards. Walls bending like paper, colors bleeding into one another. She awoke before dawn again, trembling. The house was quiet except for the slow tick of the clock. But when she exhaled, she could swear the air itself exhaled back. She picked up her notebook, the one she hadn't written in for months, and began to list what she remembered from the dream. Colors, tastes, fragments of words. Blue equals salt. Amber equals grief. White equals forgetting. Black equals the sound itself. Every page she filled seemed to hum faintly. When she pressed her palm to the paper, it felt warm, alive almost. By afternoon, the town felt different. People spoke softly, glancing over shoulders. Someone had found the old church bell swinging on its own at night. Someone else swore the sea had started humming again. And then came the stories, each one stranger, yet connected. A man heard his mother's laugh in the refrigerator's buzz. A child claimed the wind called her by name. A woman swore her dead husband's footsteps echoed through the walls exactly at midnight. The town was remembering itself, and Mara could feel it. That evening, she and Lena sat by the dock, watching fog roll over the black water. Mara told her about the dream, the colors, the flavors, the voice. Lena was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Synesthesia. It happens under stress. The brain mixes senses." Mara smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe the sound isn't in my head. Maybe it's collecting things we've lost." "Collecting memories," Mara said softly. "Pieces of people." The fog curled tighter around them, and in the quiet between the waves, a low note began to hum, so faint it could have been imagined, so real it made their bones vibrate. Lena froze. "Mara, I hear it too," Mara whispered. For a moment, they both listened, and within that single, endless tone, they heard dozens of voices, each saying a different thing, each vanishing before meaning could take shape. "Wait for me. 1, 2, 3. I still remember your hands." Then silence again. When they looked toward town, lights were flickering behind every window, as if the whole place was breathing in unison. Mara knew then what she had begun to suspect. The sound wasn't haunting them. It was made of them, of every half-forgotten moment, every grief that hadn't found a voice. And now, it was growing louder. The map said Oak Lane, but there was no sign anymore. Just a dirt path swallowed by roots and ivy, and a silence that seemed too complete. Mara stood at the edge of it, her breath curling white in the chill air. She had read about the Westcott house in an old archive, a place where sound itself had once been recorded by a man who believed memory could be captured in walls. The article was half folklore, half science. The house retains vibrations. Voices echo not through time, but through guilt. Now she was here, and already the air felt different. Thick, resonant, like standing inside the throat of something that wanted to speak. The house appeared suddenly from the fog. Victorian bones, bowed but unbroken. Its windows clouded with dust. Its porch collapsing under years of weather and rumor. A single vine hung across the door like a warning. Mara brushed it aside and pushed gently. The door opened without a sound. Inside, the air was still, but not empty. It had weight. It hummed softly, like a note someone had played long ago that never stopped vibrating. The first room, the kitchen, was bathed in gray-blue light from a cracked skylight. Dust floated like ash in a sunbeam. Every surface looked forgotten, yet arranged with strange precision, as if someone had just stepped out moments ago. She felt the hum immediately. It was faint but constant, a minor chord vibrating under her skin, soft and mournful, like an organ playing itself in another room. When she stepped closer to the counter, the sound changed pitch, as if responding to her movement. She whispered, "Hello." The chord wavered, then returned to its original key. In the hallway, a mirror hung crooked on the wall. Her reflection seemed to lag, her face moving slower than her body, eyes blinking a fraction late. The air here smelled of salt and paper. She noticed a narrow door near the staircase, half open, leading into a small nursery. When she entered, the hum from the kitchen faded, replaced by something gentler. A melody, a lullaby, broken, incomplete. The tune drifted from the far corner, where a small wooden music box lay on the floor, cracked open. Inside, the ballerina's head was missing, her one remaining arm forever reaching upward. The cylinder inside turned slowly, though the box hadn't been wound. She knelt beside it, watching the mechanism spin. Each note it played seemed older than sound itself, like something remembered through glass. When she touched the box, a flash of warmth ran through her palm. And then, faintly, behind the music, she heard a voice, a woman's voice, singing softly, words indistinguishable. Mara pressed her ear closer. The voice grew clearer for a moment, then broke apart, like a tape stretched too thin. "Hush, the night will remember." And then silence again. She found the ledger in a drawer by the window. The cover was cracked leather, initials etched in faded ink. A.W. Inside were dozens of names, written in careful cursive. Each name had a small note beside it. A date, sometimes a single word. Gone. Left. Forgotten. Halfway through the list, Mara froze. There it was. E. Ellery. Mr. Ellery. Beside his name. Still listening. Her hands trembled. The ink was faded, but the pen pressure was deep, recent. She closed the book slowly, feeling the paper pulse faintly beneath her fingertips. As the light outside dimmed, the house seemed to exhale. The walls groaned like tired lungs, and the hum returned, stronger now, weaving through each room, each corridor. Mara lit her lantern and set her recorder on the floor. Its red light blinked softly, like a heartbeat. She spoke aloud, voice calm though her heart raced. October 16th, Westcott House, Oak Lane. The sound is consistent, low frequency, minor chord, layered vibrations. It changes pitch when approached, possibly interactive resonance. As she spoke, a faint whisper threaded through the hum, mocking her rhythm, echoing the very words she said. She paused. The echo stopped. Then, after a few seconds, it continued, repeating her sentence back, out of sync, possibly interactive resonance. Her mouth went dry. She tried again, softer. The house replied again, this time replacing her voice with someone else's. A man's. The voice spoke from the walls. Older, deeper, but tender. You came back. Mara turned slowly toward the sound. Her lantern flickered. The hum in the kitchen rose into harmony, as if welcoming something. The music box began spinning again, its broken tune merging with the house's vibration. A perfect, aching chord. Mara whispered, "Who are you?" Not who, the voice said. What? Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had stopped following rules. She sat on the dusty floor, listening, writing, recording. The hum changed constantly, shifting between rooms, drawing her like a tide. Sometimes she thought she heard laughter, sometimes weeping, sometimes the sharp inhale of someone remembering pain. And every so often, she heard her own name, spoken softly by a voice she didn't know but felt she'd loved once. Mara. Each time it came, the sound grew clearer, until she could hear not just tone, but meaning. The house wasn't replaying sound. It was returning it. Fragments of memory that the town had buried under silence. Near midnight, she found a small shoe under the nursery bed. Child-sized, leather cracked. A faint outline of sea salt on its sole. She placed it on the desk beside the ledger. When she did, the hum shifted again, and the air filled with overlapping voices. Children counting softly, a lullaby spinning backward, a woman laughing through tears. Her recorder caught everything, every breath, every whisper. But when she checked the playback, there was nothing, just static, soft, rhythmic static, like breathing. By dawn, Mara no longer felt fear, only awe. The sound wasn't trying to scare anyone. It was trying to remind them of songs that had been forgotten, of names erased from ledgers, of moments left unfinished. As the first light crept through the windows, she whispered to the empty room, "I remember." The hum softened. The house went still, and for a brief second, just before she left, she heard a single word return, gentle and grateful. Good. The post office in Lorne Bay hadn't been open past dusk in decades. Yet that night, the mailbox on the corner of Maple and Fifth gleamed faintly, as though someone had just brushed fresh oil across its iron surface. Mara stood beneath the flickering street lamp, holding the envelope that had arrived with no stamp, no return address. Only her name, written in soft, slanted handwriting that felt like a whisper. For when the air forgets its silence. That was all it said on the front. Inside, a single sheet of paper. And on it, one line, centered, written in graphite instead of ink. At the hour the glass remembers, go where the wind hums lowest. Below the line, Faint pencil dots formed what looked like coordinates, latitude and longitude. When Mara traced them with her fingertip, a chill moved through her hand, up to her shoulder. The ink seemed to hum faintly, as if it wasn't just writing but a residue of sound. The coordinates pointed 20 miles inland, an abandoned train depot near a farming town she'd never visited. She tried to convince herself it was some elaborate prank. Yet when she turned the paper under the lamp, she noticed a familiar rhythm in the pencil pressure, the same delicate spacing as the lines in her own ledger. It wasn't possible. She hadn't shown that ledger to anyone. And still, whoever wrote this letter had echoed its voice exactly. Even the way her pen hesitated before certain words, like the writer was catching breath mid-thought. The next morning, she brought the letter to Lena. Lena read it twice and then, without looking up, said softly, "It's handwriting like yours." "But I didn't." "I know. That's what I mean. You didn't write it. But it came through you somehow." Mara folded the page back into its envelope and stared out the window. Beyond the glass, the fog was returning from the bay, slow and low, like it was dragging a memory behind it. Lena put on a kettle. "You should reply." Mara frowned. "To what?" "To whoever this is." They started the correspondence. Maybe it's not about them finding you. Maybe it's about you finding what they already heard. The kettle clicked. Steam spiraled in a column of light. It sounded, faintly, absurdly, like the same low hum from the woods. That evening, she wrote her reply in pencil, on lined paper that smelled faintly of cedar. To whoever writes at midnight, the sound has not stopped. It moves differently now, slower, closer to the pulse behind my ears. I've begun to hear shapes inside it, syllables, maybe, or breath. If you know how to listen without falling into it, teach me. M. She folded it neatly and walked to the mailbox just before midnight. The fog was heavier than usual. When she dropped the letter through the slot, she thought she heard, faintly, from somewhere below the street, a single piano note. Not a melody, just one tone, suspended. The next morning, another letter was already waiting. Same handwriting, same paper. Do not pull the sound toward you. Let it move through. It does not want to be owned, only remembered. When it passes through your chest, breathe slow. The air between heartbeats is the doorway. The letter was signed only with a single initial, A. Days turned into a rhythm, not unlike prayer. Each evening Mara wrote a page. Each morning, she found one waiting in return. The words from A were never demanding. They were tender, sparse, and almost musical, as though the writer understood the balance between silence and language. A whisper is only a sound that remembers it was once a word. The fog is not weather. It is memory trying to take form. The letters are not sent through the post. They arrive because the sound knows where to place them. Mara began to feel that these letters weren't messages, but translations, the sound expressing itself through two people in parallel. By the third week, the letters started to include coordinates again. This time, not inland, but scattered along the coastline, near towns that had once appeared in Mr. Ellery's old notes. She mapped them out on her wall with red pins and strings. A pattern emerged, faint, circular, incomplete, like a clock with missing hours. The towns were all places where something had been lost. A collapsed lighthouse, a burned-down boarding school, a vanished ferry route. And in each of those places, according to archived notes, people had once reported hearing the same untraceable tone. One night, Mara received a longer letter, the first in weeks that didn't feel like instructions but confession. I used to live in a place where the sound came every Thursday. We called it the glass hour, the moment when mirrors turned cold and clear and the air felt like water. Those who stayed awake through it would remember things that weren't theirs. Faces, lullabies, bits of someone else's weather. You asked how to listen without falling in. You must let it dissolve your outline. Not every disappearance is loss. Mara read those lines again and again until she fell asleep at her desk, the letter still open beside her. When she woke, the candle had burned out, and outside her window, a soft gray dawn shimmered, humming faintly like breath. In the weeks that followed, the correspondence deepened into something neither friendship nor love, but a shared act of listening. Each letter from A seemed to harmonize with the sound's nightly variations. When the tone dipped into a low vibration, A's letters arrived heavy, written in graphite, so soft it smudged at the edges. When the sound brightened, the handwriting was lighter, almost dancing. Mara began to suspect that A wasn't simply writing to her, but with her, that the sound used both their hands to communicate something larger, slower, older. Then, one night, the letters stopped. The postbox remained empty for 3 nights, then 5. The silence inside the envelope-shaped absence was worse than any tone she had ever heard. She began to write even without reply. Dozens of unsent pages filled her desk. A, if you've gone quiet, I'll listen for you. A, if the sound has moved, tell me where. A, if you are the sound, forgive me for calling you a person. By the 7th night, exhaustion overtook her. She dreamt of a shoreline where the fog moved backward into the sea, and standing there, just beyond the tide, was a figure holding an envelope. The figure lifted its head, not a face, but a faint shimmer of blue-gold light, and whispered, "The hour the glass remembers." When she woke, there was a letter waiting on her pillow. The handwriting was hers. The ink, not graphite this time, but salt water pressed into paper. I did not disappear. I only became quieter. Every correspondence ends when the listener learns to hear without writing. Go to the place where glass meets fog. The next sound you hear will not be mine. It will be what comes after silence. Below the words, a small set of numbers, 12:03 a.m. The hour the glass remembers. That night, Mara didn't write back. She simply sat by the window, the candlelight flickering on her face as the fog drifted inland once more. And when the clock struck 12, the sound came again, softer now. Not from outside, but from within. It carried no fear, no echo of loss. Only a faint warmth, as though the correspondence had turned into a part of her breathing. And somewhere, perhaps far across the coast, another candle burned the same way. The light of someone who had once signed their letters with a single letter. The postbox on the corner of Maple and Fifth had been silent for years. Its paint was the color of dried kelp, its mouth sealed by rust. Yet one night, beneath the low hum of fog, Mara found it breathing. A letter waited inside. Thin paper, handwriting that slanted as if written during a heartbeat. No stamp, no return, only her name, Mara Lorne, written in pencil that shimmered faintly when she tilted it toward the street lamp. For when the air forgets its silence. Inside, a single line. At the hour the glass remembers, go where the wind hums lowest. And below, faint graphite dots, coordinates. She traced them with her thumb and felt vibration, like a distant chord trapped under skin. She knew the numbers pointed inland, toward a forgotten depot. But what unsettled her wasn't the direction. It was the rhythm. The pressure of each letter matched the pulse she'd been charting in her notebook. The sound knew how to write. At dawn she carried the page to Lena's shop. Steam from the kettle blurred the window. Outside, gulls cried as though calling to unseen tides. "It's your handwriting," Lena said quietly after studying the note. But softer, like someone writing through you. Mara shook her head. "Maybe it's coincidence." "Coincidence doesn't breathe," Lena replied. She poured tea, the porcelain singing faintly. Both women froze. The cup vibrated with the same low frequency they'd come to recognize. The sound moved through everything now: wood, glass, bone. That night Mara wrote a reply. "To whoever hears what I hear. The sound moves differently now. Sometimes I feel it inside my breath. If you can teach me to listen without falling, I'll wait by the postbox." She slid the envelope into the rusted mouth at exactly midnight. The fog thickened as it closed behind her, swallowing the echo of her footsteps. When she turned away, the street lamp flickered once, then steadied, as if exhaling. The next morning, another letter waited. Same paper, same graphite script. "Do not pull the sound toward you. Let it pass through. It does not wish to be owned, only remembered. Between heartbeats is the doorway. A." The initial felt deliberate, gentle. A. No name, only space. Mara folded the page carefully. The graphite left a faint residue on her fingertips, as if the letter had been written in dust from another world. Days became rhythm. Each evening she wrote. Each dawn a new page appeared. The postman never saw anyone deliver them. A whisper is a sound that remembers it was once a word. The fog isn't weather. It's memory learning to take shape. Their correspondence became ritual. Mara stopped chasing the sound with machines. She began listening the way A described. Eyes closed, shoulders loose, allowing the hum to travel through her instead of into her. At first she felt nothing. Then came warmth, slow, tidal, patient. She realized the sound wasn't in the air, it was in the pause after breath. Weeks later, A's letters carried coordinates again, small towns, farmsteads, all forming a crescent along the coast. Mara marked them on her wall, red pins connected by string. A faint pattern emerged, incomplete, like a clock with missing hours. Each location, she discovered, had once reported loss. A sunken ferry, a burned theater, a vanished child, and always, before the event, someone had described hearing a tone in the fog. One letter arrived thicker than the rest. I once lived where the sound came every Thursday. We called it the glass hour, when mirrors turned clear and the air felt like water. Those who stayed awake remembered faces not their own. You asked how to listen without falling in. You must let it erase your outline. Not every disappearance is loss. Mara read until dawn, the candle burning to its wick. When she finally slept, she dreamed of a coastline made of light. Each wave carried letters folded into foam. Then silence. No letters for 3 nights. 4. 5. She kept writing anyway. Hey, if you've gone quiet, I'll listen for you. Hey, if the sound moved inland, tell me where. Hey, if you are the sound, forgive me for calling you a person. On the 7th night, she dreamed of a figure standing in shallow surf, holding an envelope that glowed like moonlight under glass. The hour the glass remembers, the figure whispered and vanished. She woke to find a letter on her pillow. The handwriting was her own, but written in salt, faint and crystalline. I did not disappear. I became quieter. Every correspondence ends when the listener learns to hear without writing. Go where glass meets fog. The next sound you hear will not be mine. It will be what comes after silence. 12:03 a.m., the hour the glass remembers. Mara sat upright. The window glowed pale blue. Outside, the fog drifted inland like a tide made of breath. She didn't answer this time. She simply waited. At 12:03 a.m., the sound arrived, softer than ever, so near she couldn't tell whether it was outside or within. And when she exhaled, the fog exhaled with her. The correspondence was complete.